mate, and welcome to Australia, a country famous for its unique animals and beautiful tropical desert landscape. In this video, we hope to inform you of the lovely continent and country of Australia by telling you about its history, culture, religion, politics, language, and major sites, in the hope that you will be encouraged to visit the land down under.
The story all began when Pangaea started to drift, creating a massive island in the southern hemisphere of Earth we now call Australia. At first, the island was empty of humanity, but after some glaciers formed, people from other parts of the Earth were able to travel to the island. Eventually, the glaciers melted, and the people on the continent of Australia were isolated. The native people of Australia, or Aboriginals, spread through the island, congregating mostly along its coasts. They spent their days hunting, gathering, and painting pictures in caves. These people were separated into about 500 different clans and were thought to have spoken over 700 languages across the continent. The people of Australia lived in relative peace until the Europeans arrived. In the 17th century, several explorers from Portugal and the Netherlands traveled to Australia but never settled. In 1770, however, an explorer known as James Cook claimed the east coast of Australia in the name of Great Britain, and in the years following, Great Britain established a penal colony on what would be called Sydney Harbour. In the years following, the Europeans began to seize the land of the locals, and their diseases spread to the Aboriginal population, causing the population to decrease after their arrival. By the 1820s, many of the convicts that had been sent to the colonies had turned the government-owned land into large and plentiful farms. With news of work opportunities and rich farming, British farmers and settlers began to immigrate to Australia. As more people arrived, settlers known as squatters pushed further into the heart of Australia, taking more land from the Aboriginal people. In 1851, gold was discovered in New South Wales and central Victoria, causing the settlers across Australia to migrate to these areas in search of riches. In addition, prospectors from China began immigrating to join in on this gold rush. The British government required a mining license for goldfield workers, which upset many and led to a rebellion in 1854, which was unsuccessful but gave miners more rights, such as the right to vote if they obtained a mining license. For years, Australia had been divided into 6 states, but on January 1st, in 1901, they were united under a single constitution that granted them independence from Great Britain. In return for their independence, they were expected to maintain their ties with Great Britain, including allying with them in a war if the time ever came. The time came with the start of World War I, in which Australia fought on the side of the British. Out of the 3 million Australians that served in the war, about 60,000 died and many returned home wounded. To help these soldiers, the Australian government enacted the Soldiers' Settler Scheme, which gave them farms and money. Between the wars, Australian culture began to gain influence from the American culture in the Roaring '20s. Like the rest of the world, the Great Depression hit Australia pretty hard, so the people attempted to distract themselves with sports until Australia's economic status got back on its feet. Around the 1930s, the emu population of Western Australia was booming, and hordes of emu were costing farmers a fortune by trampling over and eating their crops. The farmers called on the government for help, so the Australian Minister of Defence sent troops to mow them down by the hundreds with the Lewis machine gun. The Emu War was expected to be an easy victory for the Australians, but the emus were too fast for the soldiers to hit accurately. Eventually, the project was shut down due to being too expensive. The soldiers retreated and the emus were victorious. During the Second World War, the Australians fought alongside the Allies. While men were away fighting, women took jobs in the factories. Shortly after the war, migrants from all over Europe began to flood into Australia and the economy thrived. During the 1960s, activists in Australia began calling for a variety of change, especially for the rights of the Aboriginal people. Throughout the 1970s, the Australian government started to enact more liberal and socialist policies, such as instituting free healthcare, abolishing university fees, creating no-fault divorce, and establishing equal pay for women. The people of Australia also began to embrace the multiculturalism that makes Australia the unique place it is today.
Australian culture is heavily influenced by Western culture, due mostly to the fact that it was colonized by the British. However, Australia has a diverse national culture since it served as a home to immigrants from all around the world after World War II. Therefore, multiculturalism thrives in Australia, as many different cultures get to blend in unique and interesting ways. The large amount of immigrants from all around the world have created many different food combinations and made Australia one of the leading centers of fusion cuisine. Australia is also a leading center of fast food cuisine and is home to the infamous Vegemite. Vegemite was first created in 1922 by the Fred Walker Company. It's packed full of vitamin B and baker's yeast, which led to the British Medical Association endorsing it. With the new publicity, Vegemite was soon found in almost every Australian home. There is a strong sense of distinctiveness between Australian territories that has led to many different subcultures. A majority of Australia's population lives in urban areas by the coast and are separated into three social classes: the upper class, the middle class, and the working class. Within this system, that very closely resembles America's, approximately 2 million people live below the poverty line. Arranged marriages are only practiced by a small percentage of Australians, and the majority of Australians marry for love. Australian culture is divided on the topic of child rearing. In the Aboriginal culture, children are indulged and supervised strictly so that the parents have more control over their children's lives. The other subcultures within Australia better exemplify Australian culture as their children are raised with less strict parental control and given more freedoms. The arts in Australia have thrived in recent decades and have gained worldwide acclaim. Ballet is extremely popular in cities and has earned international prestige for Australia. In terms of literature, Australia is one of the leading nations in per capita spending on books and has recently developed a strong sense of culture through popular literature by Australian authors. The didgeridoo is a wind instrument developed by Aboriginals that is usually cylindrical and painted in a variety of colors. A technique to play the didgeridoo allows musicians to breathe in through the nose while exhaling air, which means that a player can hold a single note for over 50 minutes. Overall, Australian culture is rich in food, art, and music. People aim to be friendly, and egalitarianism prevails throughout society. Multiculturalism makes Australia a unique breeding ground for new creations and allows different cultures to mix in interesting ways.
Prior to English colonization, Indigenous Australians, similar to the natives of America, had their own faiths. Aborigines were mostly animists, had rituals emphasizing transitions of life, such as birth and death, and placed a lot of emphasis onto the land and ocean. By the 18th century, religious leaders believed the Indigenous Australians were in need of Christian faith, and like always with imperialistic culture, went about forcing people to convert. Towards the late 1800s, because of the gold rush, a bunch of immigrants ran over to Australia, bringing with them their religions. Examples include Irish Catholicism and English Anglicanism, among others. Also, the religious leaders went about setting up missions, spreading their good old faith and civilizing the Aborigines. Thankfully, in 1901, freedom of religion was enshrined in Section 116 of the Constitution of Australia, allowing any Australian to practice whatever religion they want, prohibiting a state church and making government secular. But the Australian government also limited immigration from other parts of Europe, also known as the White Australia policy. This ended up ensuring that Christianity was the main religion of Australia from then on to today. Even though currently 61% of the population practices some form of Christianity, religion in Australia is still very diverse and the religious landscape is constantly changing. Other faiths include atheism, agnosticism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Judaism. Australia has the official language, but English is the national and de facto language. There are Aboriginal languages spoken, but most are extinct, with only 70 of them surviving and 30 of them not endangered today. Australia has a sign language known as Slang, which is the main language that approximately 10,000 deaf people use. There are other Aboriginal sign languages as well, such as the Yolngu Sign Language and Warlpiri Sign Language. With citizens of different ethnicities, there are also multiple foreign languages spoken, with Mandarin, Italian, Arabic, and Greek being spoken the most. Melbourne is the most multilingual city, with multiple ethnicities being combined. In Australia, the English spoken there is also considerably different compared to the rest of the world. The English has considerably distinct dialects and mannerisms, and has been influenced by Aboriginal language. Australian English probably originated as a combination of British regional dialects used by groups of convicts and others who came to the colonies. Australian English is different from British and American English, but does not vary much regionally. Various social factors affect accent and style, including social class, education, gender. Some slang commonly used by the Aussies include within Kui, which means nearby, Dinkum, which means legit, true, and or real, and Rorting, which means to cheat and fiddle around. Rorting is a very common word used in Australian politics.
The politics of Australia are structured around the federal parliamentary constitutional monarchy. Australians elect parliamentarians to the Federal Parliament of Australia. In Australia, voting is mandatory and required by the law as it operates on a two-party system. The Parliament of Australia, also known as the Commonwealth Parliament, is the legislative branch of the government. The bicameral system has strongly been influenced by the Westminster system in addition to United States federalism, thus making it a democracy. Parliament consists of 3 different sections: the monarch, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Currently, the Prime Minister of Australia is Malcolm Turnbull, leader of the cabinet and head of the government. The office of the Prime Minister is the most powerful political office held in Australia. The High Court of Australia is the Supreme Court and the final court of appeal in Australia. It has the power of judicial review over laws passed by the Parliament of Australia. The High Court comprises of 7 justices, including the Chief of Justice of Australia, who is currently Susan Kiefel. At national level, elections are held every 3 years. The most recent Australian election took place July 2, 2016. The House of Representatives is elected using the Australian instant runoff system, and the Senate is elected using the single transferable voting system. Overall, in the past 30 years, Australia has maintained a proper balance of powers in their government and political situations. Some major sites and places worth visiting in Australia are the Sydney Opera House, Great Barrier Reef, and Uluru. The Sydney Opera House is a multi-venue performing arts centre located in Sydney, Australia. It was designed by a Danish architect, and the building formally opened on October 20th, 1973. The Opera House consists of multiple performing venues which host over 1,500 performances annually. Great Barrier Reef is the world's largest coral reef system, comprised of over 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands. The reef is located in the Coral Sea off the coast of Queensland, Australia, and can be seen from outer space. The Great Barrier Reef supports a diverse range of many organisms, some of which are endangered species. More than 1,500 species of fish live on the reef. Uluru, meaning Island Mountain, is also known as Ayers Rock. It is a large sandstone rock formation located in central Australia. Uluru is sacred to the Aboriginal people and is home to an abundance of springs, waterholes, rock caves, and ancient paintings.
With its amazing sights, both natural and man-made, strange animals, and rich and diverse culture, Australia earns a 5 out of 5 as a wonderful vacation spot, and 4 out of 5 for the safety, due only to the dangerous nature of some of the creatures living there, which in the end are no match for the locals who will protect you and make you feel right at home.